Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. The topic that we're focusing on is candidate attraction and job marketing strategies. My name is Ian Alexander, and I head up marketing for telemetry. And I'm joined today all the way from England, our head of client solutions, Stephen Schwander. Stephen, good afternoon, I believe, for you, correct?
Yes, good afternoon.
All right, well, welcome everybody. We're going to jump into what I think is going to be a pretty good session. I want to do a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. First of all, we're going to have some polls during the presentation, so please be ready to jump in and give us your feedback on some of the topics that we're talking about. It's something I like to do, and actually when I participate in webinars, I love this because I can kind of see when we're talking about a topic what some of the other people on the call are experiencing and kind of benchmark that way. So that's good. As well, I would encourage you also to ask questions when they occur to you. There is no harm in asking a question early. If we cover it in later slides, we'll just wait and cover it in those later slides. If not, we can inject it into the conversation. If we don't get to them during all the questions during the presentation, we'll cover them at the end. So there is a webinar console. It's usually on the right side of your screen that you can chat in your questions. So feel free at any time to do that. And with that, we'll get started. So a little bit about the agenda. We're going to talk about, we'll sort of define what the topic is. So what is candidate attraction? Some of the recruiting challenges that we see our clients and prospects face out there as we work with companies. And these challenges sort of feed into the candidate attraction side of the recruiting equation. Some reasons for implementing some new strategies, and then the bulk of what we're going to do is talk about key practices around job marketing and candidate attraction. Of course, we'll do question and answers as I just talked about, but let's get started. Stephen, why don't you tackle this one? What is candidate attraction as we're talking about it today?
Sure, absolutely. So I think, on one hand, it's going to be a lot wider than we talk about today, but on the other hand, really what it is, it's the act of getting your open positions out in front of qualified candidates in a compelling way. A lot of people will define this as sort of more passive recruiting, the post and wait, or cross your fingers and hope that something happens. But I think that undersells it. It really is very active, and it can be proactive. But it's literally that active, getting your jobs distributed and communicated out into the marketplace widely enough, but also narrow enough with a compelling message. And the idea is that you want to attract respondents. Right, so it's passive in the sense that you're waiting for people to respond, but it's active because you're getting it out in the place where they can see it and in a way that they want to respond to it. So that could be distributing it to job boards, social networks, digital ads, be they banner ads or otherwise, display ads, pay-per-click ads, events, recruitment agencies, referrals, you name it. Any way to get the message out in a compelling way to get respondents to come back in.
Great. So as we talk about the recruiting challenges, Stephen, and you are in front of customers probably more than anybody else here, but talk about kind of what you see out there and driving the need for some new strategies here.
Yeah, I would suspect that a lot of people on the call today are a tad bit like myself. If you've been working in the recruitment market for any time, you probably are out there looking at what the market looks like, reading other people's ads, running searches on Indeed to see what jobs are open in your field. Not so much to look for a job, but more just to kind of see what the experience is like. And so, we can all probably do that and speak to this slide, that one of the huge challenges is poor candidate experience. And part of that is that they might apply for a closed requisition. Part of it might be that, jobs are out there in the broader ether, in the internet, that really haven't come straight out of your applicant tracking system or through an authorized distribution mechanism, so that the branding is off, the experience is off. There are outdated links. A lot of times our clients are finding that their information is getting hijacked by third-party aggregators who are scraping their site and pushing different data out. So there's a lot of poor candidate experience out there. Also, from a client perspective, there's just not enough good candidates. And so while distributing jobs is almost an absolute necessity, oftentimes really broad attraction strategies are going to yield a lot of unqualified applicants. And so there's a real balance there, and we'll talk to that in just a bit. And then finally, it's a lack of scalability. So depending upon how large your recruiting team is, how many jobs they distribute on a daily basis, getting jobs out into the right places manually just isn't scalable. It's a couple other problems that they have is stagnant budgets. It's funny, the economy has taken off for the most part. The talent market has really tightened tremendously. I attended a conference here in London this week, and heard just how difficult it is for all sorts of different companies to find the right candidates. But the budgets have not grown with this increased demand. So you have a real stagnant budget out there. Where do you spend your dollars in a way that makes sense? There's a lack of awareness there. I think it was funny, they were talking about how many different job boards are out there, but the reality is, as a recruiter, how do I know them all? How do I get to them all? So there's a lack of awareness and a lack of ability, scalability to get to them. And then if I get to them, I don't even really know if they're performing for me. Now, don't get me wrong, most applicant tracking systems can tell you where a hire originated from. It's not always electronically tracked, so sometimes it means that candidates have to self-identify. But let's just back that up for a moment. If I'm a recruiter and I have an open position, it's too late for me to wait until that position is filled to find out where the candidate came from. A lot of people don't even have visibility as to what's happening on their jobs as they're live, right? So where is the job posted? What's the applicant flow from the places that I have it posted to? So poor visibility into performance, not only at the end, but also through the process, becomes a challenge.
Great. So with that, we're going to jump to the first poll. Just to kind of take the pulse here, what challenges do you all face? And sort of where do you map to the challenges that we threw out there? So of those, which ones do you face? And just go ahead and click the poll there, and we'll give it a few minutes. Got about 20% of the people voted so far, so good. Seeing that rack up here, 50%. And just in the interest of keeping things moving, I'm going to move on here. Close the poll, and let's see kind of what the results were there. So obviously the biggest one, of course, need more good candidates, and we've got stagnant budgets as well, and poor visibility into the recruitment results. So not surprising that people want more good candidates. I'm not surprised to see that at all. So when we talk about sort of broad strategies for candidate attraction, what we're going to cover here, one of the big ones that you're going to hear over and over again is start with segmentation. Really not dealing with your job families and your candidate types as individuals, as segments of people that you're going after, and understanding who those are by using candidate personas to really dig deep. And when you talk about attraction strategies, part of what that we're going to talk about as well is broadening your sources, so that you're really looking, you're trying to map your sources to who you're looking for, as opposed to broader kinds of attraction strategies. So we're going to talk about that. Again, expanding those channels, and also to really get into a more strategic view of how you operationally attract candidates, centralizing control of that process, so you can really focus on the results you're getting and not sort of scattering your candidate attraction programs throughout across your recruiters, people doing different things for different regions or different different disciplines, but really looking at centralizing that, because the more you centralize it, the more you can continuously analyze it and refine. So, Stephen, with that, or actually, I'm going to talk a little bit about the other portion of what we're talking about here. Is, everybody's using job distribution, advertising, who is on the call, most of the people we talk about. So we're talking about sort of adapting your strategies to become more capable within your organization and get better results. So over the years, we've developed a maturity model around attraction. So it's across all recruitment market functions, but looking at the attraction portion only, these are the kind of 4 boxes that we see companies falling into. So on the very basic side, in the inbound attraction, you have some sort of manual job posting to each job board. It's kind of a one-to-one relationship, but not much beyond that. And again, as we talk about this, we're talking about attraction within a number of different realms of getting candidates. So attraction is one portion. Outbound sourcing, directly sourcing candidates, is another portion. Engaging and nurturing and making the most of the candidates that you already have, whether they're in your applicant tracking system, in email boxes, etc., is another portion. And then candidate experience, converting those candidates, so when you attract them to your website, that you provide them with a great experience and you have high conversion rates. So you're getting more of those candidates that you attract to convert to applicants. So, but again, focusing in on inbound attraction, we move to a more functional box here where you have basic efficiencies in place. That's you're automating your job advertising and your posting, and you're using a lot of free and diversity sites. And then where most of our clients and prospects fall are somewhere between functional and modern here, where you're more targeted on the modern side and you're using a lot more channels. You're starting to see things like pay-per-click advertising and social site advertising, as well as referral programs. And then finally over to the level 4, where you're fully optimized, you're constantly analyzing and refining those metrics, so you're able to, by job family, focus on which boards, which social sites, which channels are getting you the most candidates and the most hires, and you're optimizing your operations so that you're taking full advantage of that. So another quick poll, where would you rank, just people on the call here, where would you rank your organization on the recruitment marketing maturity model when it comes to candidate attraction? Okay, and we're still getting votes in. And I'm just going to leave it open just a little bit longer. And okay, we'll keep it moving. Let's close it and share the results. So yeah, so the biggest portion, the biggest grouping there is in the middle. That's what we see with the companies that we talk about. We've got some optimized and some basics, so that's good for the optimized. And the whole purpose of this is to move, to sort of see where you are, see what you need to move along, and that's kind of what we're going to be talking about here. So, Stephen, let's talk about some of the key practices here for candidate attraction, and I'll start off with segmentation, as we mentioned before.
Yeah, absolutely. So, this is really an idea that comes out of marketing, right? Really understanding who the target audience is, and I think one of the challenges that I have with talking about attraction is that we often stop at the point of job distribution, which is really just getting your jobs out into the marketplace in as simple a way as possible. And unless you can step back and be a little bit more strategic about how and where you're advertising those jobs, you're going to stand the risk of missing your audience, right? So you might spray wide, but you still might miss that audience. So there's a concept of a persona, which is really kind of imagining who that best candidate is for your jobs, right? And you could develop a persona by job family or maybe by skills, competencies. What's the typical, not so much the title of the job in your world, but what's the typical job title that this person might have out in the real world, right? Because oftentimes, our ATS job titles just don't really match up with the targets that we're looking for. You could even, push out and say, what are their hobbies, right? Over here in the UK this week, are they into, are they into rugby, right? Should they advertising on rugby sites, for instance? What kind of media do they consume? Do they shop? And if so, where? What's their value system? And understanding that might then help you to define not only a message, but then also potentially places that you would want to distribute your jobs to that might not necessarily be just your typical job boards, right? So you want to use that experience, you want to use your imagination and really think about the people that you're targeting.
And that this is the fun part. I've come at it from the marketing side of things, is really kind of brainstorming. Like, what are our best candidates, or when we're hiring engineers within a specific department, what do they look like? Let's poll our top performers. Let's get to know them a little bit more. Imagine what they might do on a Saturday afternoon, or what things are kind of important in their lives, and those are going to kind of uncover clues to where you can broaden your distribution. You can research sort of channels to get to, as Stephen was talking about. Should we be, rugby sites? It opens your mind up to really, when you get that specific, very specific picture. Now, of course, that's not going to apply to everybody who might be a good candidate, but it's a great way to really visualize who you're looking for, and then uncover those additional sources that might make the difference in terms of getting to them, finding good channels to get to them.
And I think right along with that then is the ability to create compelling ads, right? And so both the segmentation persona piece of it and also the creating the compelling ads piece of it. I attended a conference this week, and the speaker of the conference had actually moved from recruiting into consumer, right? And is now bringing. Now he's coming back and bringing all the things that he learned from consumer digital marketing back into the recruitment realm. And he made a really good point that those of us who are HR recruitment professionals, if we probably work in a company that has digital marketing professionals, right? People who understand the consumer world, and we may want to bring them in to help us do some of this persona identification, but also compelling ad writing. Now, this is sort of a trick slide because most of us know that we don't have control over the job descriptions that we push out into the marketplace. And this was always a challenge when I managed recruiting at a couple of large companies, is that first of all, it's very labor intensive to redo the job titles or the job descriptions, and we don't really have control over that. So I think we need to be able to step back and say, okay, where do I have control? Is there potentially an evergreen job that I could put out there that doesn't come through my ATS so that I can get some better language into a job advert? Is there some content or copy I want to put into a graphic or a banner ad that then leads to the underlying job, but something that can entice and draw attention. Job titles, again, we don't have control over that coming out of the ATS, but if we can use our marketing system to put job titles in that are going to draw attention to the eye when people do run a quick search on Indeed, or they do run a quick search on Google, that these job titles will will encourage them. So again, being creative, trying to use content and titles that are going to have an emotional response, and impact on the reader.
Yeah, and I chose this ad because it really shows it's a bit of an older ad, but it really shows a company that understands who they are, right, from a branding standpoint, and understands who their audience is. And so, when you look at Dove, they are, basic beauty products for real people. And so this is kind of a great kind of sort of example of how you need to kind of look at your creative when you're doing your ads, is really understand who you are, what your employer value proposition is, not from a desired state, but from a realistic look of what's the big reason that someone would want to work for you. And this can vary obviously by job category, but really understanding that, and then tailoring your message to who you're trying to attract, and that's where those personas come in, right? And one thing I would throw in there from a marketing standpoint is, when you think about how many candidates am I attracting, there are a number of different leverage points, right? You have, what sources am I using? What audiences am I tapping into? So what's my target audience? It might be, let's say you're advertising on a healthcare job board. Okay, so that's your target audience. It's those healthcare job seekers within that board. And then there's your offer. How good is the job? Is the job a great job? Is it a really compelling job? And then there's your creative. What is my message? What am I saying about this job? Things that Stephen talked about. When you look at those things, by far, by multiples, the biggest leverage point there is, where am I putting my message out? Right? What's my universe of potential candidates? That's going to give you the biggest swing in your response rate. The second biggest swing that you're going to see in your response rate is, what's my offer? How compelling is my job? Now, those are the biggest. When you're looking at response rates, those are the biggest things that will affect your response rate one way or another. The third, though, and very important, and kind of tightly tied in with what your offer is, your job offer is what are you saying? What are you putting into the advertisement? That can sway things 300% one way or another. Now, your target audience, that can sway it thousands of percents one way or another. But this is still a very big one in terms of swaying your response rates one way or another.
So Ian, I'm going to take a second out, before we move forward. And there's a question out that I think this is probably a good time to stick it in here. And the question was this: that if a passive prospect is not reading ads, and of course there's no reason to believe that they are, then how our job ad is going to be an effective method of reaching this key target audience. I think we've hit on a couple of the key items in here. And when we've talked job distribution, we can't paint the whole activity with a single brush, right? So let's take a large company. We've got a large client that literally posts thousands of jobs in any given month. And we'll hit on some of the ways that are effective ways to do that. But when you start looking at those job segments where you're really trying to reach an audience that's not reading the job boards, right? They're not going to Monster because they're not actively seeking a job. Now you have to start to talk about, getting back into that persona. What are they reading? Where are they hanging out, right? Are there places that I can put banner ads that may not be job advertisements, job board advertisements, but would lead to some sort of response. So again, going over those personas when you're looking at passive talent, and that's a whole other conversation to actually define passive talent, isn't it? But when you're going after passive talent, and let's just for the sake of this argument say they're the ones that aren't on job boards every day looking for a job, right? Their boss hasn't kicked them off today. They're not actively looking for a job. They didn't get laid off. Their spouse didn't move. For whatever reason, they're not actively in the market. These are people who are relatively happy with their jobs, but would take an opportunity to do something that is really exciting to them if they would hear about that. And that's what you have to believe about that passive candidate. And then you have to say, okay, so that passive candidate's not reading Indeed. Where do I post this message out to them? And how do I target the message so that they'll respond, right? So number one is target. Number two is the content, and it's probably not job title in that case because they're not looking at job ads, right? It's some sort of other content, some sort of other hook And then, thirdly, you want to be able to do some A/B testing in terms of how your responses are going. So if you're doing a banner ad or you're doing some sort of evergreen job advertisement, you may want to test a couple of different messages out there and see which ones get better responses. And you might want to think about alternative action. So it might not immediately be a call to action to go apply for a job. It might just be to, hey, would you be interested in this type of job? If so, send me your LinkedIn profile, right? And give them an opportunity, give them a place where they can upload their LinkedIn profile to tell you that they might be interested in talking at some point in time. And so we might want to talk about different and alternate ways to respond. And I'll try to pick up on those points as we move forward. But I just thought that was a good spot to jump in with that question.
Yeah, agreed. And then also to go beyond that, it's not always necessarily ads that you're placing. You can sponsor content within social networks, and you can sponsor content, be it LinkedIn or Facebook or Twitter. So there's ways to get to people. And again, as you said, Stephen, go back to those personas. Model your top performers. And for those kinds of passive jobs, those ones where they might be more specialized, really build a model based on your understanding of your top performers and your ideal candidates, and then where are they spending their time? Where do they shop? What kinds of magazines do they or online content do they consume? And that'll kind of guide you in this way to go beyond sort of the traditional.
Yeah, I think with all of that, we've just spoken to that slide, and you agreed because you moved on. So thank you. So. This is a little bit counterintuitive, because when we think about, a lot of clients have too many applicants, but not enough really good quality applicants. So we often say go broad with your distribution, but broad means use a lot of channels, but understand your segmentation data so that the channels make sense, right? So you can start with a large number of channels and then refine those channels based upon the actual results that are coming in, right? And you can do that if you have a marketing system that allows you to do that as the jobs are live. You can actually, see the results as they come in and make changes as they go, and then based upon that, you can sort of optimize those channels by job family. So don't be afraid to push the job out there, but you want to do it in a way that makes sense.
Yeah, and here's the good news. The thing about marketing your jobs is, as marketers, things change so quickly, and the kinds of channels and the kinds of ways you can reach your target audience in terms of candidates or potential candidates change all the time. So you don't have to have all the answers. You do have to have the curiosity and the discipline and the understanding of how to test different channels, get the data back, and then refine, right? So there's no prerequisite that as you're doing this that you need to know all the answers. You may have some experience that you can bring to it, and that's great, bringing the experience that you've had doing this kind of thing and using channels. But if you get too locked into what you don't know what you don't know. When things are changing so much, we talk about going broad and using segmentation data. Go broad and then whittle it down based on real data, and that's the way it's done.
As much as we're trying to lower our agency dependency, etc., we include this slide to say, when we're looking at inbound attraction, one of the legitimate sources is using agencies. We get the message to agencies so that they will, push candidates in our direction. The problem is that's often an activity that takes place apart from all of your other marketing and attraction activities. So, our recommendation is to basically distribute out to agencies in the very same way that you distribute to other channels, right? So you want to formalize that process. You want to understand. We sort of already do it in the agency realm. Like we kind of segment, right? We know which agencies are better for finance roles versus IT roles versus, jobs in Chicago versus Phoenix, etc. But formalize that process and then track the results, right? Make sure that you're using the same mechanisms that you're using on your job distribution track those results when they come back in as well. And there's all sorts of other reasons to do it, as well. But I think really, for the sake of this argument, it's really understanding where your best candidates are coming from.
Okay, and another poll here. Let me pop that open. I guess the question isn't necessarily what is the cost per hire, but do you know the cost per hire in your organization? We talk about analyzing results. How many of us on this webinar here really know what our cost per hire is for all my job advertising sources? So I'll give you a couple minutes to come in here. So if you disagree, you don't know, and if you agree, you know, and if you're somewhere in the middle, then use the somewhat qualifiers. So let's see, about half voted so far. Give it a couple more seconds. Everybody please weigh in. Good. Okay, so let's close that out and look what we have. So we've got some I don't knows, which is fine. We're not always tapped into everything that's going on within the organization. Some strong agrees, but the biggest portion here is I kind of know one way or another. So if you have any questions around that or want to qualify that, go ahead and pop your questions in around that, and we'll hide the results and fire it back up and move on here to using the right tools. So it's kind of part and parcel of whether you know whether or not what your cost per hire is for each channel of the tools you're using. So talk about that a little bit, Stephen.
Yeah, I think we're all in the world of technology, and I think we understand that there are tons of tools out there, either job distribution tools, job aggregation tools, employee referral tools, and campus recruitment tools. There are a lot of tools to get at different kinds of candidates, and as much as I'd love to believe that there's probably one tool that can do it all, there's probably not. That said, it really makes sense to centralize your job distribution, right? Regardless of what channels your jobs are going through. Particularly if you're a larger, more complex enterprise, if you can build a central tool that pushes jobs out, even if it means that you're pushing them into another tool, let's say for campus recruitment, for instance, but if you can send those jobs out from a single place, then you can start to add a lot more analysis and a lot more discipline, and be far more sure about the quality of the experience as it pushes out. So if you can use kind of a single tool that includes maybe boards, social networks, agencies, digital ads, maybe that same tool has to be used to push it into some specialty avenues that you use. Maybe you use a special employee referral avenue or a special campus recruiting avenue, but your distribution tool is still sending it into those places so that you're able to automate that, that you're able to kind of minimize the overhead for a recruiter, but most importantly, that you can measure everything and refine your tactics based on that measurement. So I think it's really important to have that centralized job distribution. I think it's also important to integrate with the ATS, I'm sure we've all had headaches, trying to either build an integration to our ATS or pull job data out of the ATS, but you want to make sure that you're in constant synchronization with your ATS. We used to think it was a really big deal that we could get the jobs out once a day, and then it was twice a day, and then it was 4 times a day. Well, now we want real-time or near real-time synchronization between our ATS and our job distribution channels. So you want to pull the jobs live from your ATS. You want to have near real-time synchronization for those jobs so that you know that jobs are pulled out of your distribution tool as soon as they're closed or put on hold. And you want to be able to use URL tracking so that you can get your full cycle analytics in. So as you push the job out, you're pushing it out with tracking code that's going to allow for automated tracking when it comes back in. I probably said this in the last slide as well, is just, again, using that single source of distribution, right? So that means that you avoid broken links, you avoid outdated jobs, you kind of avoid that poor candidate experience. I'll tell you a real quick story. As I was doing a quarterly review with a large client once, and we were looking at their traffic, and you should always be measuring your traffic, not only the ones that you are expecting, but the ones that you don't know. And we discovered that there had been a huge uplift in traffic from a certain job aggregator that does a lot of advertising on the radio. And they, at the same time, had a lower by the same amount from Indeed. And so they were now paying another job aggregator to push their jobs out. And we could tell that the candidate experience had gotten really messed up with it. So when they hit those ads, they weren't going straight into the ATS. They were having another kind of a candidate experience. And because they were using a single distribution mechanism, tracking all the traffic that came back in, they were able to see this disjoined experience and put it back under control. So a lot of times we'll go into a client and they'll say, well, we're using this distributor for these 3 boards, but these 2 boards over here, they just scrape our site. And I say, well, how do you do that? Well, because that's free and we're paying this distributor over here. And so it just makes more sense, but it doesn't, because they're not able to maintain quality across all of that. Take advantage of free. One of the really cool things about the free sites is, particularly Indeed, but now Monster and LinkedIn have also jumped in the free bandwagon, is that it gets the message out, right? And companies like LinkedIn are spending so much money on SEO that you're able to gain some of that positive momentum. Some of the the free areas of LinkedIn too. I mean, if you can encourage, if you have a tool that allows your recruiters to share it in their updates on LinkedIn, that's a really good way to get at some targeted audiences as well. And again, you want to do it from a centralized place so you can track the kind of results that are coming back. But what'll happen is, if you can start to maintain and use these free sites, you will get some savings. And then what you can do is, if you now have a really good way to measure the impact of other boards, you can now use that savings to go buy more boards that actually or more avenues, more channels that are helping, and it just will increase your traffic.
Yeah, and we've seen some huge savings from clients who are able to finally see that, which kind of leads to the next poll, which is, do you auto-post to the free boards? And again, we're not talking about scraping. We're actively posting to free job boards and understanding sort of where the traffic's coming back, and etc. And give it a couple more minutes here, or a couple more seconds. We're about half voted at this point. Get a few more. Okay. Good, and let's close it and see what we've got. So yes, we've got the largest portion actively posting on free boards. That's great. And a large portion saying no, we don't, and a few in the middle. So that's any insights on that, Stephen?
No, it's about what we're seeing in the marketplace. It makes a whole lot of sense.
Okay. Good. So, declare independence. What are we talking about, Stephen?
Yeah. So, I do speak with a lot of clients who in the past have been very reliant on their media purchasing partners to provide the tracking data for their job performance. And in a world where we all trust each other, that's probably a good thing. But the reality is that there's a lot of question marks there, right? Everybody's got different reasons for providing data. So if you can get data directly from your distribution tool rather than from your media purchasing or your media companies. And you can compare and contrast, and together you can help kind of understand a lot more about what's happening in your job distribution and response. But you want to use URLs that are totally independent from your media, track it independently. If there's a disconnect between what the media is reporting and what you're seeing, that's okay, because then you can kind of sit down and have a conversation about what's really happening. But you want to be able to standardize how you track across all your channels, rather than taking reports from the different channels themselves. And we maybe overstate this, Ian. Automate everything, but I would certainly say make it possible to automate everything. And what I mean by that is, once you've defined those, that persona, right? The person you're going after, the job family, the skill sets, etc. Then you want to be able to create a system and use a distribution tool that would allow you to push as much out as possible automatically. So, job comes into your distribution tool, and maybe based on the metadata on that job in the ATS, I'll be real simple here. I can tell from the metadata that it's an IT position, and I'm going to push that job automatically to DICE. The next one that comes in, I can tell automatically it's a finance position. I'm going to push that to eFinancial Careers. I might have a contract for a large job board so that all my Northeast jobs go to Monster, but all my Midwest jobs go to Career Builder. It's those sorts of rules that allow you to automatically post and distribute jobs based on those business rules. Now, all of the time that you save can then be put into some of that more targeted advertising that we were talking about earlier in the call.
Yeah, and that's it goes back to centralization as well. The more you centralize the knowledge about what kinds of ads are working for what kinds of job families, the more strategic you can be about then refining and improving that. Whereas if you have a decentralized model where every recruiter is getting in and posting their own jobs and maybe using their own advertising language and going to their own boards, you don't have as much control. You don't have as much opportunity to improve that. Also, by centralizing, you're able to automatically post to free boards for every job, because why not? Right? It doesn't cost you anything to go to the free boards. So if everyone goes to the free boards, that's great. If you deal with OFCCP requirements as a contractor, this is a great way to make sure that everything is going to diversity boards as well. So if you've got free boards and diversity boards covered, and then you have intelligence about, for this particular job family, these are the boards that have worked best for us historically, so let's post to those as well. Then you've got a very centralized, easy, time-saving, giving your recruiters more time to respond to what's coming in, which is also coming in faster because these jobs are getting out faster because it's an auto-post situation. They can focus on what they do best, which is respond, vet, and move candidates into the selection process. All right, and then measure and optimize everything. This is huge, right, Stephen?
Absolutely. I think we're all tracking probably relatively similar analytics, and we probably all have relatively the same sorts of frustrations with trying to get data out. But obviously, we want to get source to hire analytics on all of our channels. I don't care if they're job boards, social networks, pay-per-click, digital ads, agencies. We're not talking about email distribution in this call, but email distribution. Shares, every possible way to get a job out. You want to be able to track not only the traffic that's coming in, but if you have that integration back to the ATS, now you can start tracking things like source of hire, source of second interviews, right? And get much down to some better quality analytics around where your good sources are coming from. And then you also want to be able to be able to analyze it by job type, by persona. You want to be able to say, look, I'm spending this much money. Where, from a dollar perspective, are my best candidates coming from? It's not always the most candidates, right? But you want to look at most and best, right? So that I can optimize that spending mix. I think I said it before, but you want to A/B test some ads and channels. And so, you can put a couple of different ads out there. I don't know if you've ever gone to buy books at a bookstore. I know we don't do that anymore, right? But remember when they used to put the two different covers on the books, and then the marketers would figure out which one sold better, because some caught some people's eyes, some caught the other. You can start doing that with your ads as well, right? Maybe job titles or whatever, and then you can come back and say, okay, where did I get better results on those ads, right? So this really drives a lot of ROI, because advertising is often the largest budget, and we could tell you some horror stories about hundreds of thousands of dollars being spent on advertising and delivering no hires, right? So it's really key to measure and optimize.
Yes, there's the $1 million hire story that we have. We got into one client.
Yeah.
Found they were spending $1 million a year on a particular channel, and when they got the data, they found they got one hire out of it that they could attribute to it. So that was quite a valuable hire. So we do have a couple questions here. Before we get to questions, I just want to let people know that you're going to get a Candidate Attraction Solution Snapshot from us after the presentation, as well as the slides. And a lot of what we covered is in this particular Candidate Attraction report. If you'd like to learn more about what telemetry has to offer by way of Candidate Attraction Solutions, please go to telemetry.com. A couple of questions here. Stephen, what's the difference between distributing to free boards and getting scraped from my career site?
Yeah, so it goes back to what I said earlier about quality, just from a technical perspective, if you can send clean data to a job board, it's always better than if they're scraping it and then they have to clean it. For two reasons. Number one, the data is not always as clean as it could be, and number two, the job might not be active anymore. And so just to maintain the quality, number one, it's much better. Number two is the tracking, right? So again, maintaining a standard way to distribute and track jobs. One of our partners on the OFCCP side, they have scraping technology and they can scrape anybody, but they far prefer to work with the XML files that our distribution tool sends out, and because of all of the issues that I just mentioned.
Great. And then this is kind of a broad question, but is pay-per-click a good source of candidates? We talked a little bit about pay-per-click in sort of one of our channels. Is there an answer to that, Stephen?
You know what? I don't know that there's an answer to that, Ian, because I don't hire people today, right? But let me put a director recruiter hat on and say, if I were looking at pay-per-click advertising, it certainly is not an expensive proposition, right? So if you start setting up, and maybe one of the easy things to do is work with one of your vendors already, like Indeed, that has pay-per-click advertising, or if you have a really good persona set up and understand where your targets are hanging out, maybe you have a pay-per-click ad on one of those places, and you can get into it without spending a ton of money. And what's most important then is that you want to do that testing again, right? So don't just spend a ton of money and then sit back and cross your fingers. Spend a little bit of money and see what kind of results come back, right? Don't wait until your hire reports at the end of the month or the end of the quarter. Go in and check that campaign on a regular basis. So I think that there's a lot more impact that pay-per-click advertising can have, but it's not a sit back and wait mentality.
Yeah, and it kind of goes back to what I was saying before, is your job is not to know everything. Your job is to find out as much as you can about what works and what doesn't work, and that's what we do. We're sort of data scientists. We creative data scientists. We put creative ads out, and we we see what comes back, and we optimize based on what we learn. And the one thing I would say about pay-per-click advertising is it's not something that, while it isn't expensive and you want to monitor it and figure it out one way or another as you test it, keep in mind that you need to get a fair number of clicks before you can make decisions about it. You need hundreds of clicks, not 50 clicks. So 50 clicks and I didn't get an applicant, or 50 clicks and I didn't get a hire is not a good measurement of that. So you want to look for kind of high volume positions where you're going to typically see a lot of applicants to get a good read on that kind of channel. So I think that's it, and we are running up here against our time limit. So I want to thank everybody for attending. Again, we will send you the Candidate Attraction Solution Snapshot as well as the slides, and we'll make the recorded webinar available to you offline as well. So thanks again for joining us, Stephen. Thank you, and go out and have a great day.
Thanks, Ian.